Peace, y'all. My name is Anaka. I'm an evolution doula, which essentially means I create a holistic ecosystem for you to guide you through your evolution. In the past, in our histories and many ancient lineages, we've always had a process of initiation, a process of challenges and changes that are doulaed and supported by our elders, our healers, our guides, and practitioners of ancestral and spiritual ways. I want to talk today about my own path, how I ended up here, and a little bit more in depth about the evolution doula process for those who are interested. I started off, being born American. I'm Black, white, and Native American, the most American you can get. And by that, I just mean someone of a severed lineage, of many severed lineages, which I've come to find through my global travels that many people feel this way. Whether they know which country they're from or not, we all have histories of ancient people with ancient knowledge that has been stripped away and suppressed and oppressed for generations. Even my white side, we have Druid ancestry, Welsh Celtic ancestry that was taken over by the English. And a lot of that history encompasses the similar ancestral knowledge and wisdom as African lineages, where we work with the elements, we work with nature, we work alongside nature and do not oppress her. And of course, in my Native American ancestry as well, nothing is written down, but they come through me in song, they come through me in ceremony, they come through me in many ways. So, a lot of my path and purpose as my own personal evolution doula for myself, because everything I do, I start with my own work, I start on myself, has been about claiming who I am no matter what, and working on strengthening my intuition to empower myself and empower my practice. I was always very spiritual. I always wanted to communicate with my ancestors. I didn't grow up with most of my grandparents. I grew up with one grandparent, a grandmother who was a medicine woman, who's also been very impactful for me in my life. But I also really wanted to communicate with those who weren't around me. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, which was a very white city, if not the whitest city in America. So I always felt very isolated, but also connected to the nature. And essentially, my evolution started with me just becoming more in tune with myself when others didn't understand me and didn't nurture what was coming out of me naturally. I've always wanted to build altars. I've always wanted to sing to the nature and sing for Creator, but I didn't really have the words or the modalities for it. I quite literally started from zero. My family definitely is creative and spiritual, but they're not openly spiritual. They just naturally infused into me ways of communicating with the nature, with the universe, and um, my grandmother, who's a medicine woman, taught me a lot about matter, earth, space, time continuum, and how this whole realm is a test for our spirit, for our souls to evolve into better karmic patterns, to contribute to this larger universe that we're in. And yeah, so I was born into a family that did believe in a lot of woo woo stuff, but I still ended up being the most woo woo out of all of us. You can ask anyone in my family. Like, I'm definitely well known as the spiritual cousin, the older sister who's just questioning everything. So yes, my background of my evolution came a lot from my own soul purpose of evolving myself and not really having guidance of how to do so. My journey becoming an evolution doula starts with me more so pursuing art first, which is really interesting. I moved to Los Angeles after living in Oregon, and after growing up in a very isolating place for a person of color, it was nice to move to Los Angeles and go to USC, where I was able to be surrounded by more folks of color, more queer folks that were open. And also, of course, growing into undergrad, 18, 19 years old, I was already evolving naturally at such a young age. Um, I was documenting a lot of artists at the time. I was documenting a lot of, musicians and creatives. And I was studying anthropology. So I was studying Zora Neale Hurston, Katherine Dunham, and other Black American women who traveled around the world and learned about themselves deeper by doing so and interacting with other folks on the ground and doing true archival, true anthropological work. I learned a lot about the awful history of anthropology as well, the racist ways of validating oppression, validating genocide, and continuing the severances that have happened in my lineages. So I learned deeper about why I am who I am and why so much of my knowledge and wisdom of all of my ancestry has been severed. And then I got into learning about people who radically created pathways for women and femmes and non binary people like me to evolve into the person that I'm becoming. So I basically learned deeper about anthropology, African American history, Native American history in school, and then I used that knowledge when I moved to South Africa to finish school at University of Cape Town. Now, University of Cape Town was having protests at the time, the Fees Must Fall protests, and I luckily was only in class for about 2 weeks, and then we started being in protest. So I ended up creating a lot when I was there. I met a lot of new friends. I created a lot of film and photography work, but I also learned deeper about my path and purpose. And actually, the first time I ever held space for a mushroom ceremony was in Cape Town in 2016 when my friends there asked me and my best friend Malika to just hold space for them while they ate the mushrooms. And I'd never eaten mushrooms before, but I just smoked some ganja and held space for them. And that was my first time ever. And now, fast forward 10 years, I'm an indigenous medicine ceremonialist with the mushrooms. So it's interesting when you look back at your path and you realize, oh my gosh, like Creator gave me so many ways to like plant the seed of who I'm becoming. And I've always wanted initiations. I've always been craving initiation practices, especially someone who grew up a percussionist and close to African history as much as possible. Always looking up videos, always listening to music, always trying to tune into my ancestry. It was where I could feel like I belonged because in Portland, I didn't really belong physically. There's a lot of white people in Oregon. I think it's the whitest state in the country, I'm pretty sure. And it was that way on purpose. You know, they made it an exclusionary state back in the day. So Black folks weren't allowed to move to Oregon until very later than any other state. So I had to use the internet and music and research in order to feel like I belonged somewhere. And then when I moved to Los Angeles and then eventually to South Africa, I was actually finally in physical embodiments of spaces where I felt like I belonged. South Africa is the first place that I really remembered my spiritual lineage. I had a huge spiritual awakening where my period synced with the new moons. And I was so aware of my womb at the time that it made me aware of so many other things, you know, the nature. I was able to read the clouds like it was the newspaper. I was running into people every day that had messages for me from spirit. I was cracked wide open in South Africa. It was my first time living in the motherland. And as someone who's named Anaka with an African name, I'm also aware that I'm the first person in my lineage to even get to go back to Africa since we were enslaved that we know of. So I feel like I've created that very Sankofa circle already. I've cultivated that relationship with myself and my ancestry. And I learned a lot about different types of lineages, which I'll go into in another conversation. But as an evolution doula now, I see, okay, I was doing my own evolution by just choosing to dive into going to these lands that I know I'm connected to and also helping document the movements happening there. So, in the Activate Sacred Wisdom archive, which I'll be posting more about on my Patreon with different stories about photos and films that I've made in the past 10 years or so, I've been documenting lots of folks who are in the underground, who are underappreciated, undervalued, but have all the value, knowledge, and wisdom that folks are looking for right now in the higher frequency, higher access spaces. So I've always been a bridge between lower income or underground healers and griots and culture practitioners, as well as artists and people, as well as getting the opportunity to do film direction and photography and creative holistic world building for artists that are in a higher frequency of access and abundance, but may not be in as high of a frequency of cultural knowledge and wisdom. So, being an evolution doula now and a holistic ecosystem strategist, I'm always holistically thinking about how to create space for people who are maybe not as in tune with their culture, but are in tune with monetary value, or who are not as in tune with their monetary value, but have so much cultural and spiritual value, and how we can create a bridge between these two. So that's been my big passion, with starting from the ground up as a person and also as a community, is seeing, okay, I co-founded Black Oregon Land Trust with my sisters in Oregon, and we did this because we noticed, okay, Oregon's the whitest state in the country. We have all these beautiful farmers that are Black and don't own their land, but they're feeding thousands of families a year. We need to find a way for us to own land as Black farmers in Oregon. Fast forward 3 or 4 years, we have almost 70 acres in Oregon. Check out Black Oregon Land Trust and all the amazing work we're doing. But this is just an example of some real tangible community work that I have experienced doing and that I will always be experiencing and always be evolving through. I think the key thing about being an evolution doula is being open about my own evolution and being open about the fact that I'm always learning and always changing. Starting as an artist first, though, was really interesting because I have such a deep relationship with artists in my community. I have such a global community of artists, and knowing the process and practice of being an artist and then transitioning into being more full time. I've always been full time a healer, but just more facing forward as a healer and a guide has been really interesting. An ancestor fell from the top. They said, "Hello, Ashe." Um, So, yes, I find it really interesting to share a little bit more about my journey. After I lived in South Africa, I went and lived in Philadelphia for a while. And then I saved up enough money to go straight back to South Africa and lived in Johannesburg. Then I got to go to Madagascar. I lived in West and East Africa at one point, or visited. And that was really potent for me as well, especially West Africa, being from Benin and Togo and Nigeria and Ghana and Cameroon. Getting to go to those places and see people who look like me was like such a big spiritual evolution for me. That's my kitty. I definitely advocate that anybody who has access to go to the motherland and experience it safely with really beautiful hosts. Hopefully, one day I'll be able to also do this with Activate. But yes, I really, really suggested. I was able to continue the Activate archive there and was also working hard on Activate Apothecary, which is what you see behind me, my herbalism journey, my herbalism business. I studied at Sacred Vibes Apothecary in Brooklyn. I studied with Priest Kailash at the Esoteric Herbal Physician School in St. Lucia. And now I'm in Chinese medicine school, which is definitely a big initiation as well into learning deeper about the physical body as a doctor, because I'm getting my doctorate in acupuncture. So this is a little bit more about my history and how I got here. And I'm super excited to Sorry, my kitty's playing with something. I'm super excited to share with you where we'll be going from here. But yes, for now, I will say that my journey into Ifa, my journey into ceremony through tattoo and mushrooms, my journey through herbalism has all been this undercurrent evolutionary journey that I've been doing to create initiation for myself and for those around me. And I find it really important to share a bit deeper about these initiations and about why it's been so important for my journey. So then hopefully you'll feel called to come join me when the offerings are available. But in the meantime, let's make some good conversation. Let's share about each other's evolution. And if you would like to work with me personally, you can always book an herbal consultation on my site, or a holistic world building session, tattoo ceremony, or if you'd like to inquire with Akashic ceremony, which is my mushroom ceremony movement, you can always message me about that as well. One love, bless.